Hello, Joseph Mogel again, continuing where I left off last week. Tips for you writers, in this case, writers and fanfiction writers. And this is a dicey topic. I believe I said that probably about a dozen times last week, but it hasn't changed in a week's time. It is a bit of a dicey topic because, like I had mentioned at the end of my last video, art, including writing, is a way that we as human beings define ourselves. So sometimes it's very difficult to talk about something like this without people taking it offensively. And I would like you to know, nothing of what I'm saying is intended as offensive. Everything that I'm saying is intended to be informative, educational, and hopefully to help people avoid pitfalls or setting themselves up for failure, which is something I hate seeing in any form. So that being said, one of the things I left off with last week was I had mentioned 50 Shades of Grey. The reason I mentioned it is because a lot of people are under the opinion or the belief that 50 Shades of Grey is fan fiction. Now, one of my previous videos on fair use, legally 50 Shades of Grey is not necessarily what we would call fan fiction. Now, this calls into question what defines fan fiction. And a lot of this comes down to copyright and fair use. If you're writing a story about characters, sorry, that was the chair. It does make a little bit of noise every now and then. If you're a fan fiction writer and you're using someone else's characters from a television show, movie series, book series, whatever it might be, if you're using other people's characters by their names, if you're using other people's world, storyline, plot elements, that can cross the line in fair use into too much of the original story for it to be new. There's also the question of whether or not you're making money off of it. If you're making money off of it, fair use is usually off the table unless it falls into the category of I'm going to blank on it, right? Category of critique, criticism, or I'm going to blank on the word entirely. Parody. That's the word. Parody. So for a lot of people who write fan fiction, you can't really make money off of it because that would violate the terms of fair use. And this is where publishers come into play. If you go over the websites of most, if not all, publishers, one of the things you will see is that there's usually a very clear, oftentimes bolded sentence in the submissions page that says no fan fiction. Now, the reason for this is copyright infringement. If you're writing fan fiction that has other people's copyrighted material in it, the publishing house could get in legal hot water. This is another thing that's contributed to that barrier between professional writers and fan fiction writers. Professional writers are going, oh, this is our original work. We're not going to get in legal trouble if it gets published and we make money off of it. Now, that doesn't mean that there's less artistry. It doesn't speak to the artistic side, but it does speak to the legal side. And this is where 50 Shades of Grey falls into the story. 50 Shades of Grey legally is not fan fiction. By the way most people define fan fiction. You're not using characters by their name. You're not using the same world setting. You're not using the same characters' parameters. She took some elements of characters from the Twilight series and she expanded upon them on their own and developed new characters based off of a skeletal set of ideas. And that was one of the other elements from fair use, which is you can't copyright ideas. So if you take the idea of, in this particular case, a dominant submissive relationship, it might not represent the BDSM community at all, but it is, in the context of the book, a dominant submissive relationship. That's an idea. Just because it appears in Twilight doesn't mean that it's automatically Twilight. In this particular vein, I would like to give an example. Now, I'm guessing that probably a good portion of you are familiar with Stephen King's Shawshank Redemption. Now, I would like to tell you about another novel that has been turned into a movie, repeatedly in fact, that involves a man falsely accused of a crime he didn't commit, sent to prison for an extended period of time, winds up achieving a great fortune, and in the end wreaks his revenge on those who had wronged him. which is in essence what The Shawshank Redemption is. That novel, by the way, is called Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. If you read The Shawshank Redemption and The Count of Monte Cristo, what you'll find is that they're very similar. So the question that would have to be asked, well, did Stephen King write Alexandre Dumas fan fiction? This is where the fair use thing kind of comes into play. Yes, Stephen King even named his main character Andy Dufresne. Andy Dufresne, Alexandre Dumas. Not really an accident. Is it fan fiction? The colloquial definition? No. The legal definition? No. Some people might define it as that. The problem is when people say, well, E.L. James got published and she wrote fan fiction, that can convince some people that you can take other people's copyrighted material, write a story, get it published, and make money. You can't, legally, without getting in a lot of trouble. And that is one thing that I really wish people would realize. Writing fan fiction is great if you're trying to make friends, make connections, develop a community. But if you're going to submit a story that contains other people's copyrighted material, you could get in trouble. I don't want anyone to get in trouble. I would like for people who write to never get in trouble for what they've written. But legally, you can't take someone else's copyrighted material and make money off of it. And that's the issue. So, E.L. James, not fan fiction. It falls under fair use. So, that's one of those misconceptions I hope I've addressed. Now, there's going to be a lot more to come on this because, like I said, fan fiction, it's a big thing. It's a very touchy subject for a lot of people, and I'm trying to do this respectfully. Now, let's see if I can get this right. Like and subscribe below. If you have any questions, please email me. My email address is available through my YouTube page. You can also get my email address through my website, which is in the hyperlink in the description below. Thanks. I appreciate you continuing to watch, and cheers.